But I think having the conversations, especially when you talk to local representatives, is critical to start getting that message moved forward. We talk a little bit about ALICE families, which is asset limited, income constrained, employed, and that is the group that really is facing this hardship.
Joining us today at the table is Marne Fauser, the president and CEO of the United Way of Central Illinois. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. I know you've been with the United Way now, approximately 2 years? Is that correct?
About 2.5 years.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself before your days at the United Way. One of the things we've learned with doing this crazy podcast is that people love to hear people's stories and how they ended up in the role that they're in today. So share a little bit, if you would, about your story.
My story is I was born and raised in Peoria, Illinois, so not too far from here.
Yep.
And then left for college, went to college at Truman State University. It's in Kirksville, Missouri,
Yep, sure.
and played basketball there. Then all of a sudden it was, after you graduate, you're supposed to find a job. And I actually had my teaching certificate, and that's what I thought I was going to do, is be a high school teacher and coach. I did it for one semester, and then I started coaching college women's basketball. So I did that for 12 years, and then
Where did you coach?
I coached at Truman State. I went back to my alma mater.
So was Chancellor Gooch from UIS here? Was she there at that time at Kirksville? Because she came from there, right?
She came from Truman, yes.
Okay.
So she was there in a different role on the academic side, yes.
Yeah, because we did a interview with her as well.
Yeah.
And she said that I think she still has family there even.
I think
because she was
so.
there for a long time.
Yeah, and her husband was a dentist in town.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
small
cool.
world.
Small
but,
world, yeah.
a lot of great people come from Truman. So,
Yeah.
Of course they do, right?
Only good people. Yeah, I love it.
And then I coached for 12 years at the college level, and then had kids smaller, didn't want to keep moving around. And, college athletics is its own beast in itself.
Yeah.
And put down roots here in Springfield. So I've been here since 2009.
Yeah, that's
Very
awesome.
cool. And what were you doing before United Way?
I was
Salvation
with
Army?
Salvation Army. It was called the Heartland Division. We covered Central Illinois and Eastern Iowa.
Okay.
So I kind of had a region I covered and a staff that I worked with in that region.
Gotcha. What so were you doing development for
Yes.
them, fundraising, staff training? What kinds
It
of?
was all of the above, but
Gotcha.
I was considered the divisional development director. So my main focus was on raising dollars and the marketing and piece of it. However, I was on the leadership team, so we did a lot of capacity building with all our locations. We had 28 locations we were working with.
Wow.
Gotcha. Including the one in Springfield.
Including the one here in Springfield.
Decatur as well, or no?
Decatur as well,
yeah, okay.
Champaign.
Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent.
Well, you mentioned fundraise. You must be a good fundraiser because you were a women's basketball coach at the college level. Have to do
Very
some
competitive.
fundraising,
Some
right?
Very competitive.
fundraising there.
Yep.
Salvation Army,
Yep,
not-for-profit
yep.
world,
Yeah.
now United Way. So you must ask for money well.
Well, would you like to have a conversation about that?
We've already had that conversation once or twice.
Did you bring your checkbook to this conversation?
Yes. So,
I think it's all about building relationships. And I think
Amen.
through coaching and through fundraising, it's all about that piece of it and taking what someone is passionate about and helping them see that future. That's what you do in coaching. You're taking young minds and trying to kind of mold them and see something that they may not be able to see themselves. It's the same thing in fundraising. Donors want to make a difference. They want to make an impact. Sometimes they don't know how. You build that relationship. What are their passions? And then you move forward.
I love it.
yeah. This guy will talk about donor dollars.
Yeah, donor dollars
I've
and
heard
how
him talk
efficient.
about it a lot because I used to be a Big Brothers Big Sisters a long time ago in a previous life,
Yeah.
and asked him to
Yes.
be on our board. and
Yes. Yep,
You
correct.
might share your
Well, yeah, I
response.
mean, I'm this is going to kind of sound bad, but when I had, probably 30 years ago, I was asked to be on a board. I'd never been on a board before. It was a voluntary board, and it was a governing board as well, which I didn't know there was a difference between a governing and
An operational board.
Yeah, but and then maybe had been on maybe 3 or 4 boards over a 2 to 3 year period, and I felt like the donor dollars that we were asking for were not being efficiently spent. We were hiring friends and family, development directors that were not developing and raising money like they should, and they were making very good money, and it was very frustrating. And so then my path crossed with Chris, and he was director of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I just said, no, I'm not interested. I was done with the whole board deal. I said, unless you read this one book called The Rockefeller Habits, and it's a system or a strategic plan, and if you are willing to run Big Brothers Big Sisters like a business, I'm all in, which he did. And so yes, talk about donor dollars and the efficiency that United Way under your governorship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, kudos to you as being a board member asking some of those questions,
Right.
because what you don't want is somebody just to sit there and that's not invested in it.
Right.
Now, you do want to make sure it's governance versus operations, because you don't want to get in the weeds of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that people look at in nonprofit is, yes, we're not selling, the koozie or the cup or so. We don't have that tangible thing you're selling from a business model.
Right.
But what you are selling is you're selling a product that encompasses hope and dreams to take somebody from where they are to where they could be.
Sure.
And so that product is what you are selling. So there is that business model to it.
Right.
The one thing I love about United Way is it's really a concept of how can we help you be a gift advisor to you. And that when you do make that donation, we want to make sure those dollars are going to exactly the places and programs that we are seeing the outcomes
Sure.
change lives, change the trajectory of X, whether that's education, whether that's health, and the basic needs. We want to see something changed.
Yep.
And so you want to see that end result there.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I've been impressed with the United Way here in Springfield, Central Illinois, is how much data is used, that the outcomes are measured in such a way that you can point to them and say, we can tell you for sure that your dollars are having an impact and making a difference. Here's the data to support it. I think one of the myths about United Ways and other charities, but especially United Way, is this idea about administrative costs. And if I give, for every dollar I give to the United Way, how much of it's really going to make its way to the organization, the charity, the great cause that it's supposed to get to. And I think people are confused by that. Will you say a few words about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things. One, we have an endowment that helps cover administrative costs, and then we have some corporate partners that help with that as well. So every dollar that we are raising through our employee campaign does go back to the community, to our programs. That's why raising dollars through our employee campaign is so critical for our community fund, because that is what is going out to fund programs that are showing that with with partnering with United Way, here are those outcomes. Now, some things you're going to look at outputs, right?
Sure.
You know, especially when you look at, you know, if you just need food or, you know, emergency housing, you know, some of those can be a little bit more challenging. But at the end of the day, you want to move the needle and move people. And so I think that is something that we take to heart, and so does our board, and we're always watching. That is a question we'll always get with this decision. Is it still 100% will go? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just think that's not just a great message, but to continue the communication about that, because I think there's just a myth for folks that so much goes to, you know, back to your point.
Yeah.
How are the donor dollars being
How are they
used?
being
And
utilized? Yeah.
The fact that every dollar you collect in the employee campaign goes specifically to serve those organizations and their programs is really significant.
And how many-
And I think it moves the needle for donors who are on the fence. When they hear that, they say, oh, well, yeah, this is a good place for me to do it. And you tell me those dollars get spread across those various programs that United Way supports versus one specific one.
Correct. And we look at, really, it's community feedback. You know, Vision, we have a group called Vision Council. They're the ones that look at applications. They're the ones that are looking at your reporting. Those are volunteers in our community that are saying, here's where the dollars should be going. It's not me. It's not our board of directors. It's not staff. It's really community-driven process. I think the other piece is the depth of the programs, you know, where you have like 24 programs here in this cycle. But again, it's the community. If the community says our number one challenge that we are facing is education, then that a higher percentage will go there. So it's
Okay.
broken out based off feedback that we do get from donors, from business owners, from our nonprofits in the community as well.
I wondered how that was.
So it's not
doled
like
out.
25.
Yeah.
It's not like a 25% split across the board.
Okay.
It is what is
Gotcha.
the greatest need that we can look to tackle over this next 3-year cycle.
And you have a board, a vision board, you said, for
We have,
that?
they're called vision councils,
vision
and it's
council, yeah.
volunteers, and we have about 8 to 12 on each council. So
Yeah, nice. So you guys support 24 different organizations or more?
well, so we fund programs.
Okay.
And we don't fund some United Ways fund an agency, and then the agency gets to decide where their dollars go. A number of years ago, this United Way went through a strategic plan and shifted their community impact model, and so it's funding the programs because that's where we want to see that data change.
I see.
And based on the feedback from the community. So,
So what would be a program? Because I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm just curious.
So we have programs with District 186.
Okay.
We have programs with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Gotcha.
We have programs with Mercy Communities. I'm trying to go down the list. Senior Services. So different, like
Okay.
their feeding program will fund that program, and it's a program of that nonprofit.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Very good.
You were talking about percentages and based on community feedback and where the needs are. Are there still 4 or 5 overarching areas like education, healthcare, basic needs? What are the categories?
Yes, that is a great question. We still have education and health. We have basic needs and financial stability.
Ah, okay.
Now, what I would tell you is basic needs and financial stability really need to come together. And those vision councils do work together when they look at funding, because how are you going to be financially stable if the basic needs aren't met?
Right.
If your basic needs are not met, you're not financially stable. So those two really lend itself to economic mobility. They partner together really well.
Yep.
So that's what we look at. There's no sense in keeping them separate
Right.
to have 4 buckets when you can't have one without the other. So how do we partner in that way?
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
So with all the inflationary things going on in our communities throughout the country, what are some of the biggest challenges you face maybe currently that you didn't in the past?
Well, I always think you have to look at what's going on in the community now. And I think everybody, regardless of where you're at or the job you have or the income you make, is getting hit by inflation.
Yeah.
Everybody's grocery bill is higher than what it was.
Right.
And we all understand that. We can all come together on that. So I think that is definitely one area. The other area that we have kind of talked about internally is how we get people from kind of that poverty line to being able to have a budget that is helping them be successful.
Sure.
And there is a hard place for people when they want to take a raise and they know that they can't take a raise because then that puts them over a specific threshold monetarily, or that puts them on a path where now you have health insurance. Well, health insurance is great, but you do have out-of-pocket expenses.
Right.
And it sometimes can be easier to decline that to not lose the benefits that you get through the government. And I think that is an area that we are definitely looking at, because what we don't want to do is hold somebody back based on those benefits. We want to help them succeed. So it's not just $1 this time. It's moving up into a manager role. And, you want to keep growing leaders. And how do you do that? You don't want barriers. And so
Right.
looking at what those barriers are and how we can make an impact.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if I'm hearing you right, we all have folks in our organizations who are hardworking, committed, dedicated, but they may be at a certain level where they still receive some assistance. They move a little bit above that level in their pay, and they lose the assistance, but what they've moved up is not enough to cover
Correct.
that
So
assistance they were previously receiving. So in essence, it becomes a financial step backwards for folks.
Absolutely.
And that's a unique scenario that I think a lot of folks don't really think about or even understand. And so people who want to advance sometimes get held back by that.
They're getting held back, and it's how hard would that be to say, man, you are working hard, you are
Right.
doing all the things, and we want to reward you for that, and then to be able to say, no, I can't take that
Right.
because that puts me over a threshold where I can't take on the additional $2,500 in expenses from losing benefits.
Right.
Yeah, and then that person stays stuck there.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck.
Right.
Because you're always you can't move past that, because for businesses you're not going to be able to, here's $20 more an hour, right? That's a huge
Right.
jump for a business
Right.
too.
Yeah, right.
And but that's probably somewhat more reasonable what they would need to not have
To
that
not
gap.
take the
that,
assistance. Yeah.
right.
Makes sense.
So I think having those conversations, they're hard conversations.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then what can you do to help them? I mean, there's a lot of intense work that would go into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are kind of on the front edge of really trying to dig into how do we solve
Yes.
that issue?
Yes, something we're definitely looking at, and we're working with a couple nonprofits right now and saying, okay, what is that cost? So if you have 5 people, what is that cost for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years? What does it? Okay, where are they at? What does a raise kind of look like? Is that annual raise that they usually get if they're meeting their goals and objectives? And so then you can kind of look at, okay, what is it going to take to get them to the point where they're not going backwards, they're going forwards.
Wow.
Yeah. That has got to be a tough one.
That is tough.
Well, and I don't know this, but I suspect there's got to be at some point that conversation has to include the government programs that are providing some of that assistance. I suspect,
Well,
right?
that's
and
definitely
therefore keeping people in this place in their lives where they certainly don't want to go down. They want to go up, but there's a ceiling there because of this government support.
Yeah, I think
Makes
those are
sense?
I think those are the tougher conversations because government works very slow and can be hard to change. It's not as nimble as maybe one would like. But I think having the conversations, especially when you talk to local representatives, is critical to start getting that message moved forward. We talk a little bit about ALICE families, which is asset limited, income constrained, employed, and that is the group that really is facing this hardship.
Sure.
And say that again there. You called them ALICE.
ALICE families.
That stands for?
Asset limited, income constrained, employed.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That means that they're employed working full time, but maybe not making enough to have that budget where it needs to be, and they probably don't have savings. So if you have a car that's getting you to work, you probably don't have the savings if your tire blows.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have an emergency.
You have an emergency,
and that's a setback for years, right? Or somebody takes out a huge loan or credit card debt that they can't really afford, but they have to fill that gap.
Yeah, and it could be you have a child in school and they need a little extra help. So do you find a tutor?
Right.
Well, the tutor is going to cost you X amount. Okay, so do I not pay the electric bill? Do I pay something on my credit card, which now I can't pay my credit card off, so you're getting those charges. I mean, those are like hard decisions every single day that you have to face.
Would is this a conversation that United Ways have been having for some time, or do you feel like this is the very front end of that? It's obviously one that needs to be had. Where I'm going with this is it feels really discouraging on one hand, knowing the people that fall in that category, but encouraging that you and your team of folks are trying to really dig into this thing to figure out some answers.
So ALICE is becoming a term that we're seeing nationwide.
Okay.
And so the United Way of New Jersey actually has put together an entire ALICE program to really look at the research and data. So you can dive down very specific in your community, which is just amazing. And so you're hearing it talked about at all kinds of levels in Washington, D.C. And now it is taking all of the data that we've been able to capture over the last few years and say, okay, what can we do locally? What makes sense for our community? Because every community does look a little different, but every community has ALICE families. And so what are we going to do to help them succeed? Because if they fall backwards, then they're falling backwards into programs right now like homelessness, and we don't want to see that number increase.
Right.
So how can we stabilize and help them move forward?
Yeah, kind of goes back to your conversation about basic needs and financial stability all wrapped up into one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool. That you guys are really trying to tackle that issue.
Yeah. And
a
there's
lot of folks want to turn to look in another direction.
And there's no easy and there's no easy solutions. It's going to take a lot of people working together, and I think that's that moment, like the coaching moment, right? Like, don't worry about who gets the credit. Like, you need the team to be successful. Yeah. So the team is your community, and how can we wrap around and help them be successful?
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge you're facing, say at United Way, versus your previous experience with Salvation Army, or are they very similar?
Well, I think when you're in the fundraising realm, fundraising is always challenging.
Sure.
For a number of reasons, and like I said, it's all about relationship building. So each donor is different, and you have donors that they have lives too, and so they may have lost, a job or kids in college or whatever it might be. So I always think fundraising is definitely, it's like invigorating and challenging at the same time.
Yep.
For sure. So United Way, I think, has always used the model of employee campaigns within businesses. I think some businesses find an internal employee campaign to be challenging for various reasons. Right. Maybe based on the position of their employees, maybe based on the schedule. What are some ways that organizations can engage with the United Way if an internal employee campaign is a real challenge for them?
Yeah, because we tried it at our organization, and we did it for a couple years, but it was hard because at the pay that many of our production employees had, I mean, many of them were living paycheck to paycheck, kind of like what you were talking about, and probably have some of those families that work for us today that are Alice families. And it didn't seem like we were getting a lot of money because we were matching whatever our employees would put in. We would match it dollar for dollar, and then of course Peerless kicked in some as well. But I felt like we weren't really adding a lot of value to the United Way because we just weren't raising enough money. I didn't think so. Yeah.
Well, I would tell you first, every dollar makes a difference.
Okay. Okay.
But I think there's a number of ways, and I think that what I'm really excited about is I think we're flexible enough and really want it to be a partnership. So I don't want anybody to ever feel like we're coming and asking for dollars. We want this to be a partnership.
Sure.
Again, that I feel like that goes back to my coaching of like how we're going to do this together.
Sure.
And we have a program called Business 365 that small businesses can be a part of, and they can donate kind of $1 a day, $2 a day, or $3 a day. So it's 365 or on up.
Yep.
Cool.
And then there's some benefits to that as far as on the marketing side and how we highlight those partners in the community. That's one way. Then you can be part of that Business 365. There's other sponsorships that we have available. We had Battle of the Paddle, which you guys were part of.
Yep.
Our participants.
No comment about that.
What kind of representation?
You could have used some college coaching.
I've seen his golf game, so I'm a little worried about his pickleball prowess.
We won't name said participant.
So when he yelled 4, I should have been concerned.
Yeah.
He was confused about what sport he was playing.
No. So there's opportunities to be part of our events in that way, and then there are traditional the employee campaign. It really is the bread and butter of most United Ways that we're seeing that shift. But again, volunteering, Day of Action is one that we have as well. I think there's a variety of ways to get involved. I'm somebody, I don't like to do the same thing twice. So if you ever said, hey, I have this crazy idea, I'm probably the one to call and be like, oh yes, let's go. We'll figure it out on the way. But just looking at different ways. Our week of kickoff, we had a blanket making with our board and with RISE. So with our board of directors and the young leaders out of RISE, we got together and we did the tie blankets, and then we donated those to Minnie O'Byrne and Ronald McDonald House.
I love it. Yep.
But it was really great networking, because I always joke, like, networking. Who are you networking with when you go to these events?
Right.
You're going to go talk to the people you already know.
That's right.
And I said, no, let's do some real networking. And I said, our more seasoned professionals on the United Way board. I wasn't saying anything else. They were just seasoned professionals.
Yep.
Well said.
Yeah.
And then working with our young professionals, because I think that was networking when you were sitting at a table and you're putting this blanket together and you're talking, and there were great conversations all night, and it was just a lot of fun. And then we had our traditional kind of kickoff where you have a lot of people coming in, you have a table, there's some food, and we had a little bit of the rally. And then on Friday was our pickleball tournament. So I think we're trying to find different ways for people to get involved depending on where they're at.
Well, I was at Schnucks yesterday preparing for my Sunday dinner, and I think we rounded up, right, at Schnucks? Do we round up?
Yep, you can round up at Schnucks.
Yes, I did that. And then Connor, my favorite young man that bags my groceries, who is just, the guy always puts a smile on my face. I don't know. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Well, they had him saran wrapped to a post. And he's there smiling as people are walking out, and he had to raise an X amount of dollars for United Way in order to get unwrapped on this post, and he was smiling. It was very creative. It really was.
Well, is that something we could do here? I don't know if you have anybody on staff you can saran wrap.
We could saran wrap Matt to the front of the put him out on South Grand, and he could be But it was really creative, I thought.
That
is pretty cool.
So
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So how long will that go on at Schnucks? That campaign, for rounding up.
Right. Usually the roundups last about a month.
A month. Okay. Yeah. And does that raise a fair amount of dollars? Or?
I don't know off the top of my head what it raises right now. Yep. But one of the great things with Schnucks is they run that in all of their locations. They're running it. It's not just specific here to Springfield. Okay. So kind of they run that based out of their headquartered location. Sure. And then that helps all the communities where Schnucks is located.
Well, that's outstanding.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, I like that.
I mean,
but again, it's what works for each company, right? And so doing a roundup is great for our grocery chains. There's some others that will do that. So it's meeting them where they're at too. Again, it's a partnership.
I'm smiling because the saran wrap deal.
Oh, it was great.
We can
and
do
you know
that.
who I'm talking about, Connor? Have you ever seen? He is just a delight. And if I see him, I'm probably shy. I cook a lot, so I'm in there 4 or 5 times a week, and I always buy him a bag of M&Ms. And you'd think I give him a $100 bill every time. He gives me a big hug. I mean, he's just the cutest kid and a hard worker. So it's kind of cool.
You mentioned Days of Action a little earlier. Can you say a little more about that? Some of our folks may not be familiar with that.
Yeah, Day of Action is our big volunteer event. We host one in the spring and one in the fall. We'll have around 200. This year it's like 225 volunteers at 22 projects out in Sangamon County. We have one project over in Menard County and a group that is volunteering over there. And it is just kind of helping our nonprofits with, maybe they need some painting done or if they need some landscaping done, and it's kind of fall and spring is kind of perfect for that sprucing up too. Sure. Sometimes there's those things that you just need help with that you don't have the bandwidth or the time. Maybe it's, cleaning up a library or something of that nature. And it usually puts about 15 to 20,000 depending of labor back into the community that you didn't have to charge or the nonprofit didn't have to pay for. So I think teams like to get out, especially if you're in the office and you can get out to one of the parks and do a cleanup. It's just nice being outside as long as it's a nice day, right?
Yeah, it's not too hot and humid. Yeah.
But we have a lot of good projects this year we're excited about and a lot of partners in that.
Cool. You mentioned Menard County. So United Way of Central Illinois covers Sangamon and Menard, is that correct?
Sangamon and Menard County fully.
So what's Menard? What cities are?
Petersburg.
Okay,
would probably be kind of the county seat.
Yes, Gotcha. Petersburg would be the biggest area over there.
Very good.
And so we have Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, which provides books to kids 0 to 5 to help with that early learning literacy and to get them on good footing. So they're mailed to the kids once a month. And they're age appropriate, and they're it's just amazing. It's an amazing program. But Menard County is part of DPIL, so is Sangamon County. But that was kind of the big one for Menard County, a way to help that community as well.
If somebody wants to know more, by the way, I should have done this earlier. What's the best way to contact you guys? Website,
so
email, phone
our
numbers?
Website is www.uwcil.org. So that is the quickest way. I could give you all our phone numbers, but if you go to uwcil.org, you can get a hold of us.
All.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. United Way of Central Illinois. So one of the things we always ask folks as we wrap these up, I don't want to go too fast if there's anything else.
I was going to say, don't forget to ask the question.
Yeah, so it's not that big of a deal. He always calls it the question.
It's the question. Yeah. Well, especially with your background, you probably have some wisdom to share.
A variety of professional experience. If you were able to look back, say, 20 years and give your younger self some advice based on what you know today, what would that advice be?
I would say my younger self would have reacted emotionally to some challenging conversations or instances. I wish I would have been a little less emotional. So I had to learn it, right? That's a learning process that I had to say, okay, I kind of need that 24 hours, to calm down and think through this. And in the coaching world, you're never off. You're
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, it's stressful, right?
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
worried, and so when
Right.
the phone rings at 1 a.m, you're like, and it's your boss, you're going,
Yeah.
you want to call everybody in right
Right.
now and let's figure
Right.
this
Yeah.
out. But I
Right.
probably maybe being a little bit more calm or not ready to react emotionally. Like sit and let it sink
Yeah.
in and make sure you're on your A game for
Yeah.
some tough conversations.
I like that.
Yeah, that's really well
Yeah.
said. One of the things that Brad says oftentimes is nothing is as good as it seems.
That's right.
Or as bad as it seems or
Yeah.
feels.
Yeah.
And so that's great advice.
Yeah.
But
It-
I, probably like
Yeah.
you, it's taken me many years. I probably still haven't learned that
Yeah.
lesson very well.
Well, there's moments that I know it now. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not going to respond. I
Right.
need
Yep.
I need to sit back, even though I want to, because I feel like I have the answer. But I'm
Right.
like, do I? Because I might feel different tomorrow.
That's right.
So just sit and really think about it. And if I still feel the same way tomorrow,
Sure.
okay,
Then
then
we'll
we'll
deal
go
with it.
there.
Yeah.
But I might not. So I think it's sitting back a
I
little
like
bit.
that.
Yeah.
I do that with employee issues where I used to just jump right on them, and be very emotional, and usually the outcome was not favorable for either party,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
most
No.
most of the time, me though, not favorable,
Yeah.
and that's great advice. I like
Yeah.
that.
It is, and it's for folks who can model that for other people. It's really good, and it's one of the things I will say, having known him for over 20 years and now worked together, he's really good at that. That for those of us who want to jump in and fix everything right now,
I'm like,
everything's
we're
not
waiting.
fixable right
Yeah,
now.
we're
Well,
gonna wait till Monday.
yes.
Yeah, it's the coaching concept, where it's like in basketball, you're trying to make the shot, right?
Right.
So I never understood why people got yelled at when they missed the shot. I'm
Right.
like, you think they're out there trying to miss the shot? So what else is going on?
Right.
Is it they need more practice, lack of confidence, or maybe if we'll talk about girls, or if they're 5'7" and they have somebody that's 6'1" closing them out.
Yeah.
They're not trying to miss the shot. So I always
Right.
think if you can sit and go, what is really happening here that caused it? And I think you can use that in every situation. So
Yeah.
with employees that they're not trying to mess up,
Right.
but something happened. So let's work through that.
I like it.
Very good coaching session.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Thanks for the work you're doing in the community.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
you,
me.
carving out the time to be here with
Oh,
us
this is
today.
great. This is fun. I love it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.